Happy May the 4th, and welcome to my Ben Talk. I'm Ben, and on this channel, I present to you something that my brain has demanded that I yap at someone about. Today is, of course, Star Wars Day, and I wanted to talk about Star Wars. So specifically, today I'm going to talk to you about Star Wars The Clone Wars TV show. The Clone Wars, which first began airing in 2008, is a beloved Star Wars cartoon, and for good reason. It contains some of my personal favorite Star Wars stories over the course of its 7-season run. The show takes place between Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and it explores the eponymous Clone Wars and fleshes out the story of the fall of the Jedi and the Republic. And it's a really great show. It's got some amazing storylines. But not every Clone Wars episode is created equally, and there are a lot of episodes. Now, I got to thinking about this recently from two conversations that I had, really. The first was one of my coworkers at my day job was telling me that they and their partner had been watching the Star Wars movies and some of the Star Wars TV shows, and they were thinking about watching the Clone Wars show, but when they saw how long it was, it really intimidated them. And another conversation I had with my sister-in-law's partner, who also enjoys Star Wars, never really got around to watching the Clone Wars because it seemed like a lot to get through, because it was intimidating. And while I love the Clone Wars, and I do think it's worth watching the entire thing, I also sympathize with people who are intimidated by how long the show is. You know, the Clone Wars is 133 episodes long over 7 seasons, plus the 2008 animated movie that was basically the pilot for the show. That's a lot to ask of someone who's not even sure if they'll like the show. And, you know, for those of us who have seen the Clone Wars, we know that not every single episode is vitally important or even good, especially in Season 1. But when the Clone Wars is good, it's really great. You know, the show introduced a lot of fan favorite characters, including Ahsoka, Captain Rex, and it fleshed out characters from the prequel films, like Anakin, especially. And also, the events of the Clone Wars show continue to be important in other Star Wars projects, but especially in Rebels, in The Bad Batch, in The Mandalorian, and in the Ahsoka show. Again though, 133 episodes plus a movie is a lot to ask of someone who may not be sure if they'll even like the Clone Wars. And even if they do like it, do they really need to watch the Jar Jar episodes? And you know, if you've already seen the show and you want to rewatch it, but you start going through, there's a lot of, you know, quote-unquote filler episodes in the show. And if you want to rewatch kind of the highlights, it would be maybe helpful to have a more curated watch guide. So I tried searching online to see if someone had already created a guide to the important episodes of the Clone Wars, so that I could share that with my coworker, with my sister-in-law's partner, in order to make the show more accessible to them so that they could get more Star Wars that I really love. And I found a couple of guides that I'll link in the description that were alright, but I didn't totally agree with their watch lists. So I decided to make my own guide on how to watch the important Clone Wars episodes. So my guide presents several different watch list options, and I'll walk you through those. But I know, you're probably looking at the length of this video and are considering clicking away. Don't worry. You don't need to watch the whole video to get started on my Clone Wars watch guide. You can just watch until the timestamp on screen to kind of get the gist of how to use my guide. And then after that, right, for those of you freaks who, like me, I'm also one of these freaks, like listening to someone yap at you for an hour and a half on YouTube, you can stick around to hear more details about each of the lists. So, with that said, here we have the Google spreadsheet that I put together detailing the importance of every episode of the show plus the 2008 animated movie. And you can find a link to the spreadsheet in the description. But to walk you through it, the left column, very simple. It's just the episode number, right? The movie I labeled as 1. Then after that, I have it by season in the standard television episode numbering format. So, 101 on is season 1, 201 on is season 2, so on and so forth, right? Obviously, the next column is just the episode title, and then the column after that is the arc that the episode belongs to. So most episodes of the Clone Wars belong to a story arc of like 2 to 4 episodes. You can find posts online. I'll share one that I found on Reddit in the description that lists all of the different arcs of the show. I did change some of the arcs from that Reddit post in the link, but that's down there as well. Now, something that the Reddit post that I'll link did was it included standalone episodes in arcs, and I didn't agree with doing that. While most episodes are part of an arc, there are certainly standalone episodes. So in the arcs column, I listed standalone episodes as none. Now you'll notice that next to the title of each arc, I also put a number to indicate the chronological order that the episodes take place within that arc. So Clone Wars is an anthology show, and it did this thing where release order and chronological order were not always the same. So, for instance, Season 1, Episode 5, Rookies, is chronologically Episode 2 in the Domino Squad arc. The other 2 episodes of the Domino Squad arc are in Season 3, with 301 Clone Cadets as the first episode in the arc, and 302 ARC Troopers as the third episode in the arc. Now, that, of course, you can watch the show in chronological order. I have watched the show in both release order and chronological order. And I think I would generally advise watching in release order, actually. I think it's easier to do that, number 1. But number 2, none of the out-of-order releases are really that confusing to keep track of. But if you want to watch in chronological order for the whole series, you can find a link in the description for the official chronological guide on StarWars.com. Now, following my watch guides, if you want to follow one of them, but make sure you're at least watching each arc chronologically, then you can just click the arrow at the top of the arc column and resort it A to Z. And that will show you what other episodes are part of an arc, basically. But the most important part of my spreadsheet is the importance score in the last column here. One of the other watch guides I looked at gave episodes of the Clone Wars bronze, silver, and gold medals based on how important the episode was. And I liked that idea, so I decided to do something similar. because there really are different tiers of importance for episodes of the series. So I actually went through and I assigned every single episode of the show an importance score. The higher the importance score, the more important I think it is to watch that episode. And the way I decided importance score was how important is that episode to the show, and or how important is it to the larger story of the Star Wars galaxy. So a 3 is the highest possible importance score and represents a completely critical episode of the show. A 2 means that the episode is still vitally important. It's just not as important as a 3. And then an importance score of 1, like this episode 211, Lightsaber Lost. An importance score of 1 means that the episode is still somewhat important, but it doesn't have anything that you couldn't do without, or anything that shows up somewhere else, that the same idea or a similar idea shows up somewhere else. So still important, but not quite at the level of a 2 or a 3. And really, those 3 categories should have been it, right? But as I was looking at the length of the whole show, I had this problem where there were some episodes that I didn't think were important enough to get a score of 1. But my stupid brain wouldn't let me go without mentioning at least a little bit about certain episodes. So those were the 0.5 importance score episodes, which just means the episode's not that important, but I would feel bad if I didn't point them out. And a 0 just means that I don't think the episode is important. Now, importance score and good are not the same thing. I do think that most important episodes are very good, although there are a few that I could take or leave, but are important enough to still watch. But that doesn't mean that a low importance episode is not good. A low importance episode might be plenty good. It just means that I don't think the episode is that important in the grand scheme of things. Now, if you're a fan of the Clone Wars already, and you're looking through my spreadsheet as you're listening to this, I'm sure you have some thoughts. I'm sure you disagree with my list. And I would love it if you had any suggestions. Go ahead and share them in the comments below about how you would change the list. Feel free to let me know what I did wrong. But also, because I want to make this video accessible to people who haven't watched the show yet, as a way to help them kind of get into it, please do keep your comments on how to fix it relatively spoiler-free. Anyways, it's through the importance scores that I have arranged the entire show into several different watch lists based on what grade I think you would get on a test about the Clone Wars if you watched only those episodes. So, you can see here at the bottom, right, are the different watch lists. We have D grade, B grade, A grade, and extra credit. And I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail later. But if the Clone War test were tomorrow, and you just needed to cram in order to just barely pass, in that case, you go to the D grade list, and you would only watch the episodes that got an importance score of 3. You would probably pass the Clone Wars test with that, but just barely. Now, if you had more time to study for your Clone Wars test and you wanted to walk away with, a pretty good score on it, you would want to watch all of the 2 and 3 importance score episodes. And that would bring you, of course, to the B grade list. If you wanted to get an A on your test, you add in the importance score 1 episodes. If you want to get some extra credit, you add in the importance score 0.5 episodes. So, pretty straightforward what each of those lists is at the bottom. Now, obviously, the only way to truly get a perfect score would be to watch every episode, but obviously that's not the point of this exercise. That said, if you start watching one of these watch guides and you decide you really love the show, I would definitely consider going back and watching some of the episodes that you skipped. I do think it's worthwhile. But for people who want to watch the show and never have before and want to watch one of these watch guides, make it a little bit more manageable, I would primarily recommend following the B grade list. That's kind of the one I consider the default. Or possibly, if you're an overachiever, the A grade list would also be a perfectly good place to start. Now, if you're somebody who's seen the Clone Wars already and you just want to refresh yourself on like the major plot points, at that point I would recommend either the D grade list or the B grade list, right? They're gonna pretty quickly get you through those key plot points. So that's it. If you want to just go ahead and dive on in to one of my watch guides, go ahead, save yourself a copy of the spreadsheet below in the description, and just start watching. If you want to hear me yap a little bit more about what's in each of these lists, whether you've already watched the show or you haven't, but you want to know a little bit more about what's in each list before you pick, go ahead and keep on watching. And we're actually going to start by looking at the B grade list, which, as I said, is basically the default. And after that, I'll take you through the other watch guide options. So, starting with the B grade list, you're going to watch a total of 66 episodes of the show, plus the Clone Wars movie, which is, to be clear, less than half of the show's total run. And, of course, you are going to start with the Clone Wars movie. Longtime Clone Wars fans may disagree with me giving the movie an important score of 3. The movie is not generally considered to be very important. Most people don't seem to think it's very good. And I certainly don't think that the movie is anywhere near the best of what Clone Wars has to offer. I honestly don't think it's as bad as people say. But setting aside how good it is, I disagree with the idea that the movie isn't that important. The movie introduces Ahsoka, Anakin's Padawan. The movie introduces Captain Rex, a major clone player in the series. These are 2 of the main characters of the show. And not only does it establish and introduce them, it also establishes their relationship with each other. It establishes their relationship with major players like Anakin and Obi-Wan. And so I think having this starting line where these characters are starting at in the movie is really helpful to see where they end up by the end of the show. It makes the character arcs and the character development for those characters complete, basically. You can't tell how far they've come unless you know where they started, right? So that is really why I think the movie is so important, and you definitely should watch the movie first. Also, I should mention the movie also introduces the character Asajj Ventress, who ends up being a pretty major player with the antagonists in the show as well. You actually don't see a ton of her on this watch list until a little bit later on, but she is an important character. The movie is her first appearance in the show. So I do think that the movie is a must-watch. And, if you don't enjoy the movie that much, don't worry. The show gets better. And if you do enjoy the movie, that's great news, because the show only gets better. So next up on the watch list is Season 1, Episode 5, Rookies. Now, Rookies is a very clone-focused episode. One of the things that I think the Clone Wars does so well is that it makes the clones feel like actual people. The clones were not droids. They were people. They had thoughts and feelings and personalities. This is an idea that the movies don't really do a whole lot with, but the show really does focus in on the idea of clones as people, and how much agency they have is a pretty major theme of the show. It's a question that the show is interested in exploring, right? So I felt it was important to include a clone-focused episode really early in this watch list. And Rookies felt like the perfect first clone-centric episode. It focuses on the clones of Domino Squad. A couple of Domino Squad's members, Fives and Echo, will continue on to be major clone characters over the course of the series. The episode also does feature Captain Rex, who, like I said, he's kind of one of our main characters. He's kind of our main clone. And it features Commander Cody, who you might recognize from Revenge of the Sith as the clone commander serving with Obi-Wan. Now, as I talked about a little bit earlier, Rookies is technically the second chronological episode of the Domino Squad arc, as you can see here. And the other two episodes are in Season 3. I do have those other two Domino Squad episodes in this watch list, so you can just wait until you get there to see the other two parts. Again, if you want to watch this whole arc in chronological order, you can, but I really would recommend doing it in release order. You know, in release order, Season 3, Episode 1, the first episode in this arc, feels like a flashback episode, kind of. And it also sets up more directly for the events of Episode 302. So, in truth, really, Rookies, this episode, Season 1, Episode 5, feels pretty divorced from the other two episodes in the arc, despite most people kind of agreeing that it's the middle chapter of this 3-episode arc. So, you know, again, I would say just stick with release order, but obviously if you want to, you can watch them in chronological order for the arc. Now, next up on the B grade list is our first full arc of the list, assuming you didn't skip around to watch the Domino Squad arc together. And that full arc that we're going to focus on here is the Ryloth arc. This is Season 1, Episodes 19 through 21. And the whole arc is both a good arc, right? But it's also important, otherwise it wouldn't be here. I will say the first episode of the arc is definitely more important than the other two, as you can see by the importance scores. This arc is focused on the Republic's attempt to liberate the planet Ryloth from Separatist control. So Ryloth is the home world to the Twi'lek people. They are probably one of the most recognizable Star Wars aliens. They're, these guys. And the first episode of this arc is a space battle, really focuses on Ahsoka learning how to be a better leader, which is why I consider this episode more important, because it's a very Ahsoka-focused episode. The second episode of the arc, Innocence of Ryloth, is an Obi-Wan and clone episode. It's got some Obi-Wan stuff. It's got some really great character development for a couple of the clones under his command. And the third episode, Liberty on Ryloth, features Mace Windu and also introduces a Twi'lek freedom fighter, Cham Syndulla. And Cham Syndulla does have some importance later on in the franchise, not necessarily in the Clone Wars. So I think this whole arc is important, both because it's got some Ahsoka stuff, it's got some clone stuff in it, and it also has this nice little tie-in for stuff that comes later. So overall, I think this is a good arc. It features a lot of good action, it's got a lot of great character moments, and in a way, it really provides a preview of the show's potential. That's it for season 1, right? This is the last thing we're watching in season 1, and as I sort of alluded to earlier, season 1 is pretty widely considered to be the weakest of the show's run. But I think the episodes that we have watched here as part of this watch list kind of give you an idea that the show has a lot of really solid potential. And that is only going to become more apparent as we get deeper into the show and the show becomes better and better. So with that, we move on to season 2. And in season 2, you're going to jump in right at the beginning of the season with episode 201 and the following 2 episodes, episode 202 and 203. And these 3 episodes make up the Holocron arc. So this arc features a fan favorite bounty hunter character, Cad Bane, as an antagonist. Cad Bane was technically introduced in the last episode of season 1, which is season 1, episode 22, but that episode's not on this list. It's not really that important, and you honestly don't need that episode, because I genuinely think that this arc, the Holocron arc, is a really excellent introduction to Cad Bane's character. So the arc focuses on Cad Bane stealing a Jedi holocron, which is a special device that the Jedi use to store information. And the holocron he steals contains the names and locations of Force-sensitive children. So the story is interesting. Cad Bane is a very fun villain, and the arc has some good Anakin and Ahsoka material. So overall, just a really great way to start season 2. Kind of a classic of this early period of the show, and moves sort of the story along nicely as well. After that, you're going to go on to the Geonosis arc. So this is season 2, episodes 5 through 8, a 4-parter here. And this arc is about the second battle of Geonosis. The first battle of Geonosis being the climax of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, this whole arc is really good. It delves into the reality of what the Clone Wars were like. And the first 2 episodes in particular, I think, are really important because they feature some really good character development for Anakin and Ahsoka's relationship with each other. Particularly the second episode of the arc, Weapons Factory, really big for the relationship between Anakin and Ahsoka. Also, this arc introduces a character named Barriss Offee. She's another Jedi Padawan who becomes friends with Ahsoka, ends up being kind of important later on. And we don't see a ton of Barriss in this watch through, but it is important to introduce her in this watch through, because when she does show back up, she's really important. So after you watch the 4-parter Geonosis arc, we are going to move on to our first Mandalore arc. So yes, if you like the Mandalorian show and you want to know more about Mandalore, about the Mandalorian people, the Clone Wars is pretty much a must-watch. It has a ton of episodes and arcs that focus on Mandalore and Mandalorians. And we're basically going to be watching all of them in this list. So this first Mandalore arc is the Death Watch arc, which is season 2, episodes 12 through 14 here. And these episodes introduce the character Satine Kryze, who's the Duchess of Mandalore. I also explore her history with Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is a very interesting element to that character and Obi-Wan as well. And just, really sets up the Mandalorian storyline that we're going to keep checking in on over the show's entire run. And that's it for season 2. Once again, we're not watching a ton from season 2, but what we are watching is important and solid, really showing that the show is growing, the show's getting better. And then we move on to season 3, and season 3, I think, is when most fans kind of agree that the show gets really good, right? So we're going to start season 3 with the very first 2 episodes of the season, which is season 3, episode 1, Clone Cadets, season 3, episode 2, ARC Troopers. As I have mentioned a couple of times now, these make up the rest of the Domino Squad arc with season 1, episode 5, Rookies. So season 3, episode 1, Clone Cadets is really a flashback episode. We see the clones from Rookies, we see Domino Squad during their time training on Kamino. And one of the nice things that this episode does is it fleshes out some of these fan favorite clone characters, and it also gives you kind of a better window into what being a clone trained on Kamino was like. We then move on to season 3, episode 2, ARC Troopers. That has them returning to Kamino sometime later after becoming more experienced soldiers in the Republic Army in order to repel a separatist attack on their home. It's another really great episode, and again, really focuses on who the clones are as people. After that, we're going to jump ahead to season 3, episodes 5 and 6. These 2 episodes are the Corruption on Mandalore arc. As I said, we're watching basically all of the Mandalore episodes in our watch through here. Of all of the Mandalore stories in the Clone Wars, these 2 were the only 2 that I considered giving a 1 instead of a 2 for their importance score. I actually went back and forth. I did ultimately decide to give them a 2 so that you have the complete Mandalore story in this list, but I don't think these 2 episodes are quite as important as the rest of the Mandalore storyline, and I also don't think these 2 episodes are quite as good as the rest of the Mandalore storyline. But they're still good, and I still ultimately think they are important for you to watch. So that's why they're here. And, aside from moving the broader story of Mandalore forward, these 2 episodes do have some character development for Ahsoka and actually for Padme as well. So that's why I changed my mind and decided to give them a 2. Now, speaking of Padme and Padme character development, we then move on to a political arc, and that's season 3, episodes 10 and 11, Heroes on Both Sides and Pursuit of Peace. So these are 2 episodes that really focus on the political side of Clone Wars. There's a few episodes throughout the show's run. We don't have a ton of episodes like that in this watch list, but I still felt it was important to include at least one story that was focused on the politics side of the Clone Wars. And in particular, I think these episodes are interesting, particularly the first one, because it does reveal that the Separatists, the bad guys from the prequel trilogy, they're not all mindless, mustache-twirling villains that are serving Palpatine, right? There are people in the Separatist movement who were genuinely part of it because they wanted better for their people. They wanted to do the right thing. And so that's something that I think is interesting about these episodes. It adds an interesting wrinkle to our understanding of the Clone Wars. And these episodes are really great for characterization and development for Padme. Padme actually gets a lot of chances to shine over the course of the show. I think she actually gets more chances to shine over the course of this show than she does in the prequel trilogy films. Unfortunately, because we're not doing a ton of the really politics-focused episodes in this arc, we're also not getting a ton of Padme episodes. But what you are seeing in these 2 episodes and in the Mandalore episodes that I just mentioned, Season 3, Episodes 5 and 6, particularly Season 3, Episode 5, you do get some of Padme, and you do get some of that development, so you get a good sense of what the show does with her character in these episodes. Also, Ahsoka's character gets some attention and some development in these episodes, particularly Season 3, Episode 10. In this episode, it does introduce a character named Lux Montari, who is a little important for Ahsoka's character journey, but also just in general, I think these episodes help Ahsoka learn to not immediately judge anybody who may be sided with the Separatists. It helps open her eyes to the fact that there might actually be good people on both sides of this conflict. Now, I know that a pair of episodes focused on space politics maybe isn't the most appealing option for everyone, especially considering that one of the big complaints about the prequels when they first came out was that they were too focused on the space politics. But I do think that these episodes are worth watching, especially Heroes on Both Sides. Now, after that, you're going to move on to the Night Sisters arc, which is Season 3, Episodes 12 through 14. These episodes are really focused on Asajj Ventress and the mysterious Night Sisters of Dathomir. This is a really cool arc, and it starts delving into some weird Force shit, which is something that I really enjoy in this show, is when it does explore some weird Force shit. And the other thing is, this arc introduces another character who ends up being pretty important moving forward. And that's pretty much the only thing I want to say about this arc. So, speaking of weird Force shit, we're going to move on to the next arc, which is the Mortis arc, Season 3, Episodes 15 through 17. So these are really cool episodes. This is one of my personal favorite arcs in the show. And this arc really delves into some crazy Force mysteries as you see Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan get stuck on a mysterious planet called Mortis. One of the things I like about this episode arc is that it really delves into what it means for Anakin to be the Chosen One, right? You know, obviously the Chosen One prophecy is kind of a big part of the prequel trilogy, but I personally don't think it's ever explored in a particularly interesting way in the movies. I think this episode arc does have some interesting exploration of that idea. I think this arc has some interesting character development for Anakin, but it's also got some good development for Ahsoka and Obi-Wan as well. And, just in general, if you really like the strange and mystical side of Star Wars, I think you'll really like this arc. Plus, this arc has some pretty big implications that ripple through several other Star Wars shows, particularly in Rebels and Ahsoka. Now, after the Mortis arc, you're going to move on to the Citadel arc, Season 3, Episodes 18 through 20. And this arc is a jailbreak arc. It's a very fun jailbreak arc. It's got some good character moments for a lot of our main characters, including Anakin and Ahsoka and a few of our clones. In particular, with the clones, there's actually a pretty big event that will have consequences moving forward. And the arc also spends a little time asking the question of, should the Jedi even be generals in a war? What does it mean for these peacekeepers to be generals? So, all around good arc, fun arc, got some cool connections in it. Definitely worth watching. So then you're going to close out season 3 with the finale, the 2-part finale, which is the Hunted arc, episodes 21 and 22. These episodes are really important for Ahsoka's development. In these episodes, Ahsoka gets separated from Anakin, and she has to find a way not only to survive herself, but also to help others survive. So it's a really great pair of episodes for Ahsoka's development, for her growth as a character, and, for the trajectory of her character arc moving forward. And that really brings us to the end of season 3 in this watch guide. And as you can see, we're watching way more episodes. Once we got to episode 10, you're not skipping any more episodes. So this is a really great season. I really think this is kind of when the show found its footing. And a lot of the stuff that happens over the course of these episodes will end up being important moving forward. So then we move on to season 4. And this is another season where we're watching a pretty good chunk of episodes, and you're jumping right into the Umbara arc, which is season 4, episodes 7 through 10. This arc is widely considered to be one of the best. It is absolutely one of the most beloved arcs of the Clone Wars show. And other than the fact that this arc is extremely clone focused, these 4 episodes, I'm not going to tell you really anything else about it. It's a hugely important arc for the development of several of our clone characters, and it's some of the best episodes that the show has to offer, particularly in the way it explores the clones as characters. Then you're going to jump ahead to season 4, episode 14, A Friend in Need. This is another episode that features Lux Bontari. It has some character development for Ahsoka, but really more importantly, this episode moves the Mandalore storyline forward more. It features Death Watch. It introduces the character of Bo-Katan, who you may be familiar with if you've watched the Mandalorian TV show. So, again, we're moving the Mandalore plot forward, and that's why it's here. After that, you're going to move on to season 4, episodes 15 through 18. This arc is the Obi-Wan undercover arc. It's a very fun arc. It basically has Obi-Wan going undercover as a bounty hunter, and so we get to see a lot of other fun bounty hunter characters. This arc also does some interesting stuff with Anakin and his relationship with the Jedi Council, is how I'll put it. After that arc, you're going to watch season 4, episode 19, Massacre. So this episode is very focused on Asajj Ventress again and the Night Sisters again. It moves forward that Night Sister story. And you will notice this is Ventress 1. There is a Ventress 2. There's a second episode that follows up on this. And it takes place right after this one. It's episode 20 of season 4, but I honestly don't think that follow-up is really all that important. The next time you see Ventress after this episode, it's a pretty easy leap to figure out what she's been up to since Massacre, right? So, yeah, we're not watching the immediate follow-up to this, but great episode. Really important, moves Ventress's story forward. After that, we're going to do the 2-part season 4 finale, which is episodes 21 and 22 of season 4. These are very good, very important episodes. watch these and that's it. I'm being very, very vague because if you somehow haven't been spoiled on certain developments in this period of Star Wars, I don't want to spoil what happens here. So, yeah, watch these episodes. So, that's it for Season 4. Again, it's another really big season for this watch guide. You know, you're watching a really good number of episodes from Season 4. You're seeing a lot of important plot points, a lot of important character development happen. And as we move on to Season 5, you're going to notice that we're starting to get fewer episodes each season again. And it's really just because we've gotten through a bulk of the important episodes. And most of what we get from this point forward is building off of what we've already established. There were a lot of episodes in Season 5 in particular that felt more like standalone arcs that weren't connecting as much to the overall narrative. But the episodes that we do get that are connected to and move forward the overall narrative in Season 5 are absolute bangers. So, we're going to start with the Season 5 opener, Season 5 Episode 1, and this is just going to be an immediate follow-up on the Season 4 finale. You'll also see that I've labeled it as the first episode in a Mandalorian Civil War arc. It's not as important as the rest of the arc, which is why it gets a 2 instead of a 3. The main reason it's even considered part of the Mandalorian Civil War arc is because it gets a couple of the key players for the rest of that arc into position, right? But it's not as key as the rest of the arc, which is phenomenal. But before we get to the rest of the arc, we are going to quickly do a stop at Season 5, Episode 6, The Gathering. So this is the first episode in a young Jedi arc, and I honestly think this is really the only episode in the arc that I think is worth your time. I think this episode is fun. It's a fun episode. It delves into the lore of how Jedi get their Kyber crystals, which are the crystals that power a Jedi's lightsaber. So it's got some cool Jedi lore. It's got some cool Force shit. If you're paying really, really close attention, you might also be able to make a connection between the planet where this episode is set and some stuff from the sequel trilogy. And that is a connection that I think is actually really, really cool. It's something that Star Wars built up a little bit over a couple different projects. I'm not going to get too into it here, but I think it's a really cool connection as well. So worth watching this episode. And of course, Ahsoka's in this episode, and also Yoda's in this episode. After that, you are going back to the Mandalorian Civil War arc. So this is Season 5, Episodes 14 through 16. And as you can probably tell by the title of the arc, it's really, really important. It's got some pretty huge implications for Mandalore, but it also has some really huge implications for a number of the important characters for the show. It's a really, really incredible arc. I do really love this one. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about it. And then after that, you're gonna close out Season 5 with the 4-part finale, Ahsoka Accused, Season 5, Episodes 17 through 20. And this arc, the Ahsoka Accused arc, it involves Ahsoka getting wrongfully accused for a crime and her attempts to clear her own name. This arc is massive payoff to the growth that Ahsoka has gone through over the course of this show. And it's got a ton of great stuff in it for Ahsoka. It's got some really good stuff in it for Anakin and his character journey as well. This arc's really great. And this arc was actually the original series finale for the show. So when Disney acquired Star Wars, the show had to stop airing because it was being aired on Cartoon Network, one of Disney's competitors, right? So it was announced that the show would be ending after the conclusion of the 5th season in 2013. And with that, right, this episode, season 5, episode 20, The Wrong Jedi, was the finale of the show. And if it had been, I think it would have been a pretty fitting finale. I'm extremely glad we got more Clone Wars. However, I actually like the real finale of the show even more. But if this was where it ended, it would have been a pretty good way to end it. Now, after the show left Cartoon Network, Disney worked out a deal with Netflix for the show to stream on Netflix. And it came out on Netflix in 2014. And when they did that, they also put out a 6th season. There was more Clone Wars. So before the Clone Wars got canceled, there were a lot of episodes that they already had plans for. And there were a good number of episodes that were basically already done. And so when the show moved to Netflix, part of the deal was that they would get to put out the episodes that were basically already done. There are actually a lot of planned Clone Wars episodes and arcs that were never produced, even to this day, never got produced. But the episodes that we did get over the course of the 6th season and eventually 7th season were a really excellent continuation of the show and helped answer some of the remaining questions that we had about that era. And we're not watching a ton of episodes in Season 6. We're only watching 5 episodes in Season 6, but they are real doozies. So we're starting with the opening arc of the season, which is Season 6, Episodes 1 through 4. And this arc is the Clone Conspiracy arc. It stars Fives, who's one of the clones we know best by this point in the series. And it features him unraveling a mystery and conspiracy at the heart of the clone army. If there were any part of the Clone Wars series that I would consider required reading for Star Wars fans, it would be this arc, because this arc explains so much about the events of the films. It introduces a lot of interesting context about the events of the prequel films. That said, I wouldn't recommend watching just these episodes in isolation, because you're not going to get the emotional experience if you're not connected to the characters, right? If you're just in it for what are the plot points and you don't care to get invested in the characters, then, fine, you could just skip to this arc, but I really would not recommend doing that. I think this arc is much more satisfying if you are attached to the characters, which you should be by this point in the watch guide. The only other episode you're watching in Season 6 is Season 6, Episode 10, The Lost One. So this episode features the Jedi receiving a breakthrough in the mystery of Sifo Dyas. So for those of you who may need a refresher, back in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, the movie, the Kaminoans told Obi-Wan that the clone army had been commissioned by a Jedi Master named Sifo Dyas. But Sifo Dyas had disappeared or died sometime, before the events of the film. And Obi-Wan and the Jedi, they were never able to solve the mystery of what happened to Sifo Dyas before the Clone Wars began. So this episode provides some answers to the mystery of Sifo Dyas, and it's really interesting and fascinating seeing the Jedi partially unravel the plot, partially unravel the great secret at the heart of the Clone Wars, but not quite get far enough to prevent the tragedy that is coming in Revenge of the Sith. So I think this episode's really great in that respect and definitely worth your time. And that's it for Season 6 that you're going to watch on this list. Now, after Season 6 released in 2014, that was all of the Clone Wars we got for a long time. And, we sometimes heard some information about what might have been included in some of the episodes they never got to make. Some of the episodes and some of the arcs that they never got to make were adapted into books and comics. But the show's true ending was not completed. And then, all of a sudden, in 2020, the show was revived for one final season on Disney+. That final season, the 7th season, would be 3 story arcs. One would focus on Rex, one would focus on Ahsoka, and then you'd get the series finale. Now, the first arc of Season 7 is actually not included on the B grade list, and that I really just think that's because they're not as crucial as I think the rest of the season is. Now, that said, if you're enjoying your watch through and don't mind adding just a little bit more, I would just say watch all of Season 7 at this point. If you've made it this far, you might as well just watch all of Season 7. Also, if you're interested in watching the Bad Batch show, you should definitely watch the first arc of Season 7, because it introduces the Bad Batch's characters and sets them up. So if you're interested in watching the Bad Batch, I would say the first 4 episodes of Season 7 go up in importance score. But for your B grade list, if you're just sticking exclusively to the B grade watch guide, you're going to start on episode 5 of Season 7, and you're going to watch the Ahsoka Alone arc, which is 705 through 708. Now, Ahsoka is not actually alone during this arc. I just called this arc Ahsoka Alone as a reference to the Avatar episode Zuko Alone, because I think this arc is doing something kind of similar as that episode, for those of you who are familiar with Avatar, really exploring Ahsoka at something of a low point, something of a crossroads for her character. So these episodes will really help get Ahsoka to where she needs to get to for the finale. Speaking of which, you're, of course, going to finish your watch through of the Clone Wars with the finale of the show, which is the Siege of Mandalore arc, Season 7, episodes 9 through 12. The 4-part finale, obviously based on the name, as you can tell, ties in with Mandalore, which is obviously why I think it's so important to know the Mandalore storyline for this show. Not only is it important for what it sets up for The Mandalorian, but it's also just important for understanding the finale of the show. This arc is incredible. In my opinion, it was the perfect way to end the Clone Wars show. Personally, for me, and this is just my taste, but if the Siege of Mandalore were a Star Wars movie, it would be my favorite Star Wars movie. I think another interesting thing about this is this arc, this 4-part arc, is taking place at the exact same time as Revenge of the Sith. So that's a really interesting element of it. And I would actually recommend that you re-watch Revenge of the Sith first and then watch this arc, because then you can see exactly how it lines up. There's several moments throughout this arc where it sort of tells you where you are in Revenge of the Sith. So it's really, really cool to see how all of that lines up. And it's just a great finale to the Clone Wars, and really, really just a great Star Wars story in general. So, with that, congratulations, you finished studying for the test, you have taken the test, and you got a B! You got an 85% on your test by watching these episodes. As I said earlier, this is the watch guide that I would recommend most newcomers to the show do if they don't want to just watch every episode of the show. But as I said, I did create a couple of other watch guides depending on just how thorough you want to be in your Clone Wars test prep. So I will explain those other watch lists next as well. And we're going to start by talking about the D grade list for those of you who are just interested in barely scraping by on your Clone Wars test. Or for those of you who have already watched the entire show and you just want to very quickly brush up on the most important plot points. So the D grade list is really bare bones, and that's why I definitely would not recommend this list for newcomers to the show. This is only 31 episodes of the show plus the movie, and you're just missing a lot by going through just the important score 3 episodes. So you obviously start with the movie, just like you do in the B grade list. Then you do season 1, episode 19, Storm over Ryloth, and that's it for the Ryloth arc. That's also it for season 1. In season 2, we're watching episodes 5 and 6, the first 2 episodes of the Geonosis arc, but not the rest of it. And then episodes 12 and 13, the first 2 episodes of the Death Watch arc, and not the rest of it. Obviously, we're keeping in those first 2 episodes of the Geonosis arc for the Ahsoka development and the 2 episodes of the Mandalore arc to establish Mandalore. In season 3, I'm keeping in the Mortis arc just because of the importance it has on Ahsoka and Anakin, and then the Hunted pair of episodes here, again, because of how important it is to Ahsoka's character development. Now, up to this point, in the D grade watch list, we have not watched a single clone-focused episode or arc. And that changes finally here in season 4 with the Umbara arc. Still, I would definitely consider this one of the big weaknesses of the D grade arc is it's not really giving you as much clones as the other watch lists do. You are also going to watch the 2-part finale of season 4, the Old Enemy Returns arc. Again, these episodes are absolutely crucial, but in the D grade watch list, you're not really getting the setup for this. Like, a lot of the stuff that happens in these episodes kind of comes out of nowhere without some of the other episodes that I would say are important to score 2. So, again, a weakness of the D grade watch list. In season 5, you're skipping straight to episodes 14 through 16 for the bulk of the Mandalorian Civil War arc, and skipping the first episode of the arc. Following that, you will do the entire Ahsoka Accused arc. So, you're getting that season 5 finale. Again, too important to skip. In season 6, you're just doing the Clone Conspiracy arc, season 6, episodes 1 through 4. And then in season 7, you're only doing the show's finale, the Siege of Mandalore arc, episodes 19 through 12 of season 7, to bring the show to a close. So, again, I really do not recommend the D grade list for a newcomer to the show. You are missing a lot of context and a lot of character development on this watch list. You're missing a ton of setup, you're missing a ton of important moments. But if you were really on a time crunch and you, for whatever reason, just needed to have a barely passable understanding of the Clone Wars by the end of the weekend, then the D grade list would probably get you there. I do also think this list works well, as I said, if you've already seen the show. If you have seen the Clone Wars before, if you've watched the entire thing, and you just want to go through and quickly refresh yourself on the most important plot points, I think this arc is actually pretty good for that, because you already have the context of the general character arc, who the characters are. But definitely not recommended for newcomers. Now, on the opposite side of the D grade list, we have the A grade list, which is another great option for newcomers who want to just do a little bit more than you get in the B grade list. So the A grade list here, I already have it sorted to put the added episodes, the important square 1 episodes, right at the top, but you can, of course, resort this first column to put it all in order, but I'm going to put it back to the way it was. Now, The A grade list is 78 episodes plus the movie, so it's 12 additional episodes added on to the B grade list. And you could just do this list from the very beginning. I think it's perfectly worthwhile to do that. But also, it works really well if you start watching the B grade list, you decide you like the show, and you're like, yeah, I'll add a few more episodes. Because it's really easy to do that. The nice thing is that the first episode that's on the A grade list and not on the B grade list isn't until after the Geonosis arc. So you do have some time to decide whether you want to watch more. So let's run through the 12 episodes that were added into the A grade watch list. And the first one is Season 2, Episode 11, Lightsaber Lost. This is a standalone episode that centers on Ahsoka teaming up with an older Jedi Master to track down her lightsaber, which she has, lost, as the title would imply. This episode's not that important overall, but it is good for Ahsoka's character development, which is why I gave it a 1. Then you're skipping all the way to Season 5 for the next important Score 1 episodes. And that's the Onderon arc, Season 5, Episodes 2 through 5. And this arc, the Onderon arc, has some interesting additional Ahsoka character development. This arc concludes the story of Lux Bantari, and this arc is notable for introducing the character of Saw Gerrera. This was the first time he showed up, was in the Clone Wars. I bet those of you who really love Rogue One and Andor, who haven't seen the Clone Wars, probably didn't know that. But yes, he originated in this show. And this arc is about the Republic trying to help a rebel faction on Onderon that Saw Gerrera is part of overthrow the government, which is allied with the Separatists. And the rebel faction, like I said, Saw Gerrera is part of it, but they're led by his sister, Steela. So this arc is the beginning of Saw's story, and it gives some context to his story. That said, I still only give this arc important score 1 because Saw doesn't end up being really important again for the rest of the Clone Wars. And I also don't think you need this arc to understand who Saw is in later parts of his story in Andor, in Rogue One, right? But still, definitely worth watching, especially if you think Saw Gerrera is an interesting character from his appearances in Rogue One and Andor. It's worth watching this to see where his story began. So the next arc we're adding in is in Season 6, and it's episodes 11 through 13 of Season 6, as well as Season 6's finale arc. And this arc is the Yoda arc. So this arc is focused on Yoda delving into the mysteries of the Force to gain new knowledge. These are really great episodes. They once again get into some weird Force shit, which I always love. And I really did consider giving these episodes an important score of 2. I just couldn't totally justify it. As much as the revelations about the Force that we get in these episodes give us some additional context, some additional information, none of it is particularly key to the rest of the show or to the rest of Star Wars. But I still think they're really great episodes. I do think they give us some additional information about the Force, and so they do earn an important score of 1. Finally, then for the A grade list, you're going to add in the Bad Batch arc at the beginning of Season 7, episodes 1 through 4 of Season 7. As I discussed during the B grade watch list, these episodes are a lot more important if you're planning to watch the Bad Batch show, because it introduces those characters, right? So these episodes do give Rex and some other clones more development as well. I just don't think it's as crucial as some of the stuff we get with the clones elsewhere in the show. So that's why it really only earns a 1 here, but still definitely worthwhile watching. And as I said in the B grade watch list, if you get to this point in the show and you've been sticking to the B grade watch list, you might as well add in these episodes, right? Just watch all of season 7. But with that, those are the episodes that you're going to add to an A grade watch list. You'll pass with like a 92, 93% on your Clone Wars test. And that's, I think, great, right? You've gotten a really, really good understanding of what the show is, what the show's about, without watching some of the more tedious episodes in the show's run. The Clone Wars is definitely a show of highs and lows, I will say. But there are still more Clone Wars, right? If you still don't want to watch the whole show, but you want more than what's on the A grade list, at that point, you can add in the 0.5 important score episodes to do the extra credit list. So the extra credit list jumps up to 100 episodes plus the movie. That's a full additional 22 episodes from the A grade list. And the entire show is 133 episodes plus the movie. So if you're already committing to 100 episodes of the show, I don't think it's that much of a leap to just go ahead and watch the whole thing. If you like the Clone Wars enough by this point to say, yeah, let me watch the extra credit episodes, just watch the whole thing, right? I do think it's worthwhile, even though there definitely are some low points in the show. If you're already committing to this much, just watch the whole thing. It's going to be worth your time at that point because you clearly love the show that much, like I do. But as I said way back at the beginning, for whatever reason, my brain was being dumb, and it forced me to create a 0.5 important score for some reason. So I guess if you want to earn some extra credit on your test, but you don't want to watch just every episode, then go ahead and watch the 0.5 important score episodes. I will say, unlike the A grade list, these are not as easy to add into one of the shorter watch lists, because the additions to this start really early in your watch through. You could, of course, go back later to watch these, but anyway. So for season 1, we're adding a good few episodes to the list, starting with the Malevolence arc, season 1, episodes 2 through 4. This is a trio of episodes about the Republic's attempt to take down a dangerous new separatist warship controlled by General Grievous. This arc has some good clone moments. It's got some good stuff for Anakin and Ahsoka. It's really the first full arc of the show, if you don't count the movie. And also, this arc highlights Jedi Master Plo Koon, who I do think is one of the coolest, background Jedi from the movies. And he gets highlighted a couple of times over the course of the show. I really love Plo Koon. He's a really cool character. This is a good arc. It's a good indicator that, this show's fun. This show has some cool stuff that it's trying to do. But there's nothing in this arc that you couldn't get elsewhere in the show, so it's really only that 0.5. Then we're going to add episode 9 of season 1, Cloak of Darkness, which is the second episode in a Newt Gunray captured arc. And this is really the only episode of this arc that we're including here. This is the only episode of this arc to feature Ahsoka, so it's pertinent to her development, but it's not crucial to her development. And this episode also features Asajj Ventress, who you really don't see a ton of, even in the other watch lists in the early seasons. She really was pretty ever-present in the early seasons of the show. So just adding in one more episode to give you a little bit more of her as a villain as well. We're not doing the rest of this arc. Episode 1 of this arc is a Jar Jar focused episode. I do tend to think that the Jar Jar episodes are the weakest episodes of the show. If you're a big Jar Jar head, then maybe you'll enjoy it. But, I just don't think his episodes are that good. And the opening of this episode of Cloak of Darkness tells you everything you need to know from the preceding episode. Now, there's an episode after this that kind of follows up on it. That one is definitely more interesting. Season 1, episode 10. I believe it's called Lair of Grievous. Hold on, let me check the master sheet. Yep, it's called Lair of Grievous. It is a really that's a really good episode. Like, I enjoyed that episode. It's not important, right? So, I couldn't even justify giving that one a 0.5. But it's a good episode if you want to watch it. Then you're going to watch Season 1, Episode 11, Dooku Captured. This is the first episode in the Hondo Ohnaka arc. So Hondo is a very fun pirate character. I actually really like Hondo as a character. But I don't think you end up seeing him at all in the other watch guides I have here. And ultimately, this is just because, as much as I love Hondo as a character, he's just not that important in the Clone Wars. He does show up in Star Wars Rebels, and he has a much more important role in Star Wars Rebels. But you don't need to have seen his presence in the Clone Wars to kind of get what he's all about in Star Wars Rebels. So that's why it's only a 0.5 instead of a higher importance score here. Now, there is a follow-up episode to this, but I didn't include it for 2 reasons. Number 1, the follow-up episode of this is a Jar Jar episode. And number 2, you can pretty much guess how things are going to turn out. So there you go. That's why I didn't include the follow-up. Then you're going to do Season 1, Episodes 13 and 14. These are the Lerman pair of episodes. It's on a planet called Lerman. That's why that arc has that name. And these episodes have some good character development for Ahsoka, has some development for her relationship with Anakin. These episodes ask questions about pacifism and when it's appropriate to fight. So, they're perfectly fine episodes, but I don't think they add anything that you can't get elsewhere in the show. But I still thought it was worth mentioning them because of, the bits of development we do get. Then you have the Virus arc, episodes 17 and 18 of Season 1. I actually really like these episodes. I think they're very fun, especially for Season 1 episodes. I think these are really fun. They've got a really memorable villain in the first episode, at least. And these episodes have some Anakin character development, so it does earn them a 0.5, but they're just not really important in the grand scheme of things, so only a 0.5. And then Season 1, Episode 22, the finale of Season 1, Hostage Crisis. And this is an episode that is part of an arc focused on the character Zero the Hutt, who you will have met in the Clone Wars movie. Zero is Jabba the Hutt's uncle. The only thing that makes this episode important is that this is technically the first time in the show you're introduced to Cad Bane, but like I said in the B grade list, I don't think you need this episode to introduce you to the character. I think the Season 2 opening is a perfectly good introduction to the character. And also, as cool as Cad Bane is as a character, he's actually not all that important, right? He really only shows up in the other watch lists when other important things are also happening, and Cad Bane happens to be there. So, yeah, not that important, but again, I should mention it. In Season 2, you're going to add Episode 10, The Deserter. Yeah, another good clone character development episode, particularly for Captain Rex. It also introduces a clone who will show up again in the Bad Batch show. But I don't think this episode really gives you anything you couldn't get from other more important episodes. You're also going to add episode 16 of Season 2, Cat and Mouse. And this episode is interesting because it's set before the Clone Wars movie. And it kind of sets up how the Republic arrived on the planet that the movie starts on. This episode has a little bit of character development for Anakin, not a ton, but a little bit. And the episode also introduces Admiral Trench, who's a Separatist villain with a pretty memorable, kind of creepy design. He shows up a couple times later in the show. He's not really that important outside of this episode, even when he does show up again. But I still thought his introduction here and the couple of other little added elements were just enough to earn this episode a 0.5. Then you'll add in episodes 18 and 19 of season 2. This is a pair of episodes about a creature called the Zillow Beast. I remember when these episodes came out, there was a lot of speculation about whether the Zillow Beast would be important, because it certainly seemed like when these episodes came out, they were setting up these episodes to have some pretty important implications moving forward, that the Zillow Beast would have some pretty important impacts moving forward. And then for a long time, it wasn't relevant at all again, and probably would have earned a 0 under most circumstances, but then it does become a little relevant again in The Bad Batch. Now, you don't need to watch these episodes to understand the Zillow Beast's appearance in The Bad Batch, but, its appearance in these episodes, its introduction in these episodes is enough to get that 0.5 score. And then to close out season 2 in the extra credit list, you're going to watch episodes 20 through 22. This is an arc centered on young Boba Fett. He's still a kid at this point, and he's attempting to exact revenge against Mace Windu for the death of his father. These episodes are pretty fun. They're good if you want a bit of character development about what Boba Fett was up to during this time period. So it's enough to earn it an extra credit spot, but it's not enough to earn it a spot on one of the other watch lists. You're only adding one episode in season 3, which is episode 7, Assassin. This episode is an Ahsoka episode about her receiving visions in the Force and using those visions to thwart a bad guy. So it's good for her character development, but it's not essential to her character development. So thus its placement here, 0.5. In season 4, you're going to watch the Slavers arc. This is episodes 11 through 13 here. This is a pretty good arc, actually. This arc has some good character development for Anakin in particular. And the arc really centers on Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan and Rex discovering and infiltrating a slave trading ring in an attempt to save some people. So, good Jedis being heroes thing. And also, given Anakin's own past, having been enslaved by the Hutts, you can imagine how this arc might play around with that idea of Anakin having to confront slavery given his own past. Even so, as interesting as this arc is for Anakin's character, it's ultimately of little importance to the overall story of the show or the Star Wars franchise, and so it does only get the 0.5 score. Then you're going to add episode 20, Bounty. That's the follow-up to the Ventress arc, the immediate follow-up to the much more important episode, Massacre. It does earn the 0.5 because of the fact that it follows up to Massacre. It tells you what happens next with Ventress, but as I said back when I was talking about Massacre, nothing that happens with Ventress in this episode can't be figured out just by filling in the gaps the next time she shows up. I don't think it's that hard to just naturally come to the conclusion of what she was up to during this episode. Then in season 5, you're only adding one episode. That's episode 7, A Test of Strength. It's the second episode in the Young Jedi arc, and it's the only other episode in the Young Jedi arc that earns any spot on any of these specific curated watch guides. And the reason I added this one is it does give you a little bit more lightsaber lore. It also introduces a droid named Professor Hu Yang, who's a pretty interesting droid character who also appears in the Ahsoka show. But this episode is not that critical. In fact, I don't think the rest of the arc is important at all. There's 2 more episodes in this arc, and they don't even earn a 0.5. But that finishes the extra credit additions. As you can tell, as you get further into the show, you get fewer of these. And I really do think, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, I think it speaks to the way the later seasons are structured. You know, any episodes that weren't moving the main story forward or developing the main characters were more or less standalone episodes or arcs, and as fun and good as some of those were, these watch lists I've curated are based off of importance and off of what score you would get if you were studying for a Clone Wars test. So that's why a lot of those standalone episodes and arcs from season 5 in particular just didn't earn a spot on any watch list, not even the extra credit watch list. But that brings us to the end of the video. If you have stuck around all the way to the end here, first of all, thank you. Congratulations as well. And I hope that this video and these watch lists have given those of you who haven't watched the Clone Wars before a good place to start when it comes to checking out the show and giving it a chance. I do think it's a worthwhile show to watch if you like Star Wars, right? I actually think it's worthwhile to watch the entire thing if you like Star Wars. But I do understand, given that it's a long show, it can feel intimidating to get started on it. So I hope that these watch guides can give you a chance to get into the show and help you learn to love it as much as I grew to love it, as much as many other fans grew to love it. Or, at the very least, I hope that one of these watch guides at least gets you the important material from it that is useful in some of the other shows, like Rebels, like Bad Batch, like the live-action shows Mandalorian and Ahsoka. For those of you who have watched the show, let me know in the comments what you think of my watch guides and what changes you'd make if you were making your own list of important episodes. I'd love to see what other people think are the most important episodes. Like I said at the very beginning, there are other lists that I found online that I agreed with some points and I disagreed with other points. And I think every Clone Wars fan is going to have their own take on this kind of thing, which I think is interesting. And I think it speaks to the different elements of the show that different people connected with. A lot of people connected with this show, myself included, and I hope that those of you who haven't watched the show before connect with it as well. With that all being said, this is a new channel, so if you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. It would be a huge help to me and help get this channel off the ground. This is only my second video on the channel, and as you can tell, based off the first two, I'm mostly going to make pretty long videos here. So long videos are not always something that are shown to people who are not already subscribed to a channel. So it'd be great if you could do any help to boost this. Share this with people you think need help getting into the Clone Wars. I am going to talk about more than just Star Wars. I'm going to talk about a bunch of different nerdy stuff that I like. So go ahead and subscribe so you can see what I talk about next. With all that, I've been Ben. Thanks for listening to my Ben Talk, and may the 4th be with you.